The third topic of this week are modality relations. There are two general dimensions concerning the different relations of modalities. And please keep in mind, in this case, we are again talking about modalities in the frame of human-computer interaction, which means we are referring to modes of interaction by the users. So these two general dimensions are the temporal domain and the amount of information conveyed. With temporal domain, I'm speaking of the possibility of presenting information or using different modalities one after another in a sequential way or in parallel during the same time. The amount of information conveyed is referring to the information that may be redundant on different or repeated on different modalities or separated, and therefore not redundant but complementary. We are all referring here to different information that are used for the same task, but this may change in the next slides. So, based on these two principal dimensions, these two principal relations actually, there is a nice approach, a systematic, which leads to or results in 4 different so-called properties. These care properties I will present now in the following. These are complementarity. This means that the different modalities are used all in order to reach a certain goal. That means, in this case, the amount of information conveyed is triggered. That means that different information are used on different modalities and they all have to be used in order to reach a goal. The typical example is the one you saw in the video from the 1980 or 1979 from MIT, the so-called put that there scenario. For example, if you would sit in this nice chair and point to the screen and say, put this angle in this cycle, and you're referring to the yellow one and the red cycle, for example, you need both information, the acoustic information and the pointing gesture, in order to interpret the user input. This would be complementarity. The next one is assignment. Assignment means that only one modality is selected for a certain piece of information, either by the user or by the system. A typical example would be a push-to-talk button, where the button press disables all other modalities and only the microphone is on in order to perceive and process information from the user voice. The third one is redundancy, and this means that the information or parts of the information are used or spread over different modalities. Coming back to the put that there scenario, an example would be put the yellow triangle into the red cycle. So in fact, we don't need any of the pointing gestures anymore, at least if there's only one red cycle and one yellow triangle. But nevertheless, the information provided by voice are still redundant in the pointing gestures. The last one is equivalence. Equivalence means that actually at any given time, any kind of modality can be used. These care properties are particularly useful to analyze individual human-computer interactions. So which kind of behavior do the users show, and so on. This can be nice for annotation. The next one, the so-called case properties, are actually used to classify different systems. This means, does the whole system provide different functionalities and can be placed in a so-called design space. This is actually a 3-dimensional space, but I will start with the 4 case properties, which are only referring to a 2-dimensional space. And this space can be seen in the figure down on the right side on the slides. The one dimension is the fusion. So is there fusion or is there no fusion? So this means, are the information or the modalities provided separate or not? Do they have to be analyzed combinedly by the system? This means we need a fusion module. The second dimension is the temporal domain. This means simply the old general domain which we know. Is it a sequential pattern, or does the system allow also for a parallel or combined way of presenting information? This leads to 4 different case properties, and I reordered them a little bit to present them more clearly. The first one is called exclusive. This just means there's no fusion possible and only one modality can be processed by the system at a time. The second one is alternate. This is actually the most widespread system design which we have nowadays. This means there is some kind of multimodal input possible by the system, but each information, each modality can only be used in a sequential way. The third one is concurrent, and this means the system can process actually information from different modalities, but they are mutually exclusive. That means they are used for different tasks. This is a rare system, but actually there have been built such systems. For example, you can dictate via voice a text and use a command or buttons or something else in order to delete a file or do a different task, like starting a different program. So these information on different modalities are not used in a combined way. The last one is a system which we would call actually a truly multimodal system. This means on the different modalities, different information for the same task, for the same intention, can be used either in parallel or sequentially and be evaluated and processed from the system together. The third dimension of this so-called design space is actually the representation level of the information provided by the users. So either we have a signal-based representation or a symbolic processing, which is again referring or quite similar to the definition of multimodality by Benoit et al.